I love you, Dada.
Imagine hearing about a teacher who didn't stop caring for children when the school day ended. A woman who opened her home to children to make headlines in recent years. This is the story of Amber Swain. And before we begin, it's important to remember that these are criminal allegations. Like every defendant, Amber Swain is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in court. For years, Amber Swain appeared to embody compassion. She wasn't only a teacher, she was a foster parent, an adoptive mother, and an advocate for children in need. To parents, co-workers, and members of her community, she seemed like the kind of person every struggling child deserved to have in their corner. She taught elementary school in Newport, Washington, a small town near Spokane, where many families knew one another. Teaching young children wasn't simply her profession. It appeared to be her calling, but her work didn't stop inside the classroom. Outside of school, Swain became heavily involved in foster care advocacy. She even served as the executive director of a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting foster families and children navigating the system. Her public image was built around one message: every child deserves a safe and loving home. In interviews and public appearances, she described becoming a foster parent almost as though fate had intervened. According to Swain, during her very first year teaching third grade, one student stood out to her. He was struggling. She noticed signs that life outside the classroom wasn't easy. Rather than simply watching from a distance, she said she became emotionally invested in helping him. Eventually, she and her husband made a life-changing decision. They became licensed foster parents. Not long afterward, that same student entered their home. Later, they adopted him. Eventually, they also adopted his younger brother. Over time, the couple expanded their family even further, ultimately adopting 3 boys. To many people, it sounded like the perfect story. A teacher recognizing a child in need, a family opening its doors, children finding stability after difficult beginnings. It was the kind of story often celebrated as proof that kindness could truly change lives. No one could have predicted that years later, investigators would begin examining those same relationships through an entirely different lens. Behind the public image, authorities say another story was unfolding, one that no one saw coming. In May, investigators with the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families contacted local law enforcement with alarming concerns. The report centered on 2 teenage boys living in Swain's household. Authorities suspected possible sexual abuse. As investigators began digging deeper, they allegedly uncovered evidence suggesting the situation might be far more serious than anyone initially imagined. According to court documents, detectives learned about text messages exchanged between Swain and one of the teenagers. Those messages reportedly raised enough concern to trigger a full criminal investigation. Soon afterward, forensic interviews were conducted with both teens. What investigators say they heard during those interviews would ultimately lead prosecutors to file felony charges. According to the probable cause affidavit, one of the teenagers, who is now 18 years old, told investigators that a sexual relationship with Swain began while he was still 17. That detail would become one of the most significant issues in the case. The teenager reportedly alleged that the relationship first became sexual in December of the previous year. According to investigators, he claimed the encounters continued repeatedly over the following months. He allegedly described the encounters as happening many times. Even more disturbing, Investigators believe one of those encounters occurred only days before he sat down for his forensic interview. If true, it suggested the alleged relationship had continued almost until authorities intervened. Detectives soon interviewed Amber Swain herself. Initially, according to investigators, she denied having a sexual relationship with the teenager. But investigators say her account later changed. According to court records, Swain acknowledged having sexual contact with him, but disputed when it began. Instead of December, she reportedly claimed the relationship started in February. That distinction may sound minor, but legally, it could become one of the most important questions in the entire case. If prosecutors can prove the relationship began in December, as alleged, the teenager would still have been 17 years old. If Swain's version is accurate, he would already have turned 18. Investigators also reported that Swain admitted she might not remember the timeline, allegedly telling detectives she could have the timeline messed up. That statement only added another layer of uncertainty to an investigation that was becoming increasingly complex. But detectives weren't finished. According to investigators, there was a second alleged victim, another adopted teenage son. His account was different, but authorities believed it was equally troubling. The 17-year-old reportedly told investigators there had been inappropriate physical contact between him and Swain. According to court records, he alleged that the touching continued for several minutes before it eventually stopped. When questioned about that allegation, investigators say Swain admitted there had been physical contact, but claimed she ended the encounter before it progressed further. Regardless of who initiated the contact, prosecutors viewed the allegations through the lens of a parent-child relationship and the legal responsibilities that come with it. By this point, what had started as a welfare concern had transformed into a major criminal investigation. The woman who had spent years advocating for vulnerable children was now facing accusations involving the very family she had built. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The trusted teacher, the foster care advocate, the adoptive mother, now standing at the center of allegations that shocked an entire community. As investigators continued gathering evidence, prosecutors prepared to present the case in court, and the charges they would announce carried consequences that could change Amber Swain's life forever. As investigators pieced together the statements, text messages, and interview transcripts, prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to move the case forward. The allegations were no longer confined to an internal investigation. They were about to enter a courtroom. For many in Newport, the news came as a complete shock. Amber Swain wasn't just another resident in town. She was an educator, a foster parent, an adoptive mother, someone whose professional life revolved around protecting children. Now, prosecutors alleged that she had violated the very trust her role demanded. When Swain made her first court appearance, the atmosphere reflected the seriousness of the accusations. The court reviewed a probable cause affidavit, outlining what investigators claimed they had uncovered during the investigation. According to prosecutors, the evidence included statements from the two teenagers, text message exchanges, and Swain's own interview with detectives. At this early stage, the judge was not deciding guilt or innocence. Instead, the question before the court was whether investigators had established probable cause to allow the criminal case to proceed. After reviewing the information, the judge determined that the legal threshold had been met. Swain was ordered to face multiple felony charges, including first-degree incest, second-degree incest, and sexual contact with a minor. Those charges immediately drew widespread public attention. For many people, the word incest brings to mind biological relatives, but legally, the definition can be broader. Because the teenagers had been legally adopted, prosecutors argued that the parent-child relationship established through adoption carried the same legal protections as a biological family relationship. That legal distinction would become one of the defining aspects of the case. Authorities alleged that the crimes involved not strangers, but children who depended on Swain as their parent. The allegations raised difficult questions about trust, authority, and the imbalance of power that can exist inside a family. Investigators emphasized that foster and adoptive parents occupy positions of enormous responsibility. Children entering foster care often come from unstable or traumatic backgrounds. Many have already experienced neglect, abuse, or abandonment before ever entering a new home. Because of that history, experts have long warned that maintaining clear boundaries is essential. Any violation of those boundaries can carry profound emotional consequences. According to investigators, one of the teenagers alleged that the sexual relationship began while he was still 17 years old and continued after he reached adulthood. That timeline became one of the most heavily scrutinized aspects of the investigation. During questioning, detectives say Swain disputed when the relationship began. According to court records, she acknowledged sexual contact, but maintained that it started after the teenager had turned 18. If proven, that version could affect how certain charges are evaluated under Washington law. However, prosecutors argued that the timeline described by the alleged victim and supported by other evidence they were gathering painted a different picture. The case, therefore, wasn't expected to hinge on a single admission. Instead, investigators would attempt to establish a timeline using multiple sources of evidence. That could include text messages, digital records, witness statements, and the forensic interviews conducted during the investigation. In criminal cases involving allegations of sexual abuse, investigators often rely on many different pieces of evidence working together rather than one dramatic piece of proof. A victim's statement itself is considered evidence. If other records or testimony support that statement, prosecutors may argue that the overall picture becomes stronger. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, may challenge those same details by questioning memory, timelines, inconsistencies, or credibility. That process ultimately belongs in court. As the investigation continued, another allegation drew attention. According to reports presented in court, prosecutors believed Swain attempted to contact one of the alleged victims after her arrest. Concerned that communication could interfere with the case, prosecutors requested strict no-contact orders. The court agreed. Swain was prohibited from contacting either alleged victim or any minors connected to the case. The judge also imposed conditions on her release. She was ordered not to leave Washington state while the criminal proceedings remained ongoing. Initially, prosecutors requested a bond of $50,000. The court ultimately set bail at $20,000. While relatively modest compared with some high-profile criminal cases, the bond reflected that the charges carried potentially severe penalties if a conviction were ever obtained. Under Washington law, the combined charges could expose Swain to years in prison, substantial financial penalties, or both. At the same time, her professional life changed almost overnight. The Newport School District placed her on administrative leave while the investigation continued. School officials released a brief public statement acknowledging the criminal case. Without discussing specific allegations, district leaders stated they were taking the matter seriously and were cooperating fully with law enforcement. For parents throughout the community, the announcement was deeply unsettling. Teachers occupy positions built almost entirely on trust. Families send children to school, believing educators will provide not only instruction, but also safety. Whenever criminal allegations involve someone in that position, public confidence can be shaken, regardless of how the case ultimately ends. Yet investigators emphasize that the criminal process was only beginning. The filing of charges did not establish guilt. It marked the start of a legal battle, where prosecutors would attempt to prove their allegations beyond a reasonable doubt, while the defense would have the opportunity to challenge every piece of evidence presented. Still, one aspect of the case continued to resonate with investigators and members of the public alike. Amber Swain had built a reputation around helping children. She had publicly spoken about opening her home to those in need. She had advocated for foster care and adoption. That history made the allegations especially difficult for many people to process. Cases involving respected professions often produce the same question. How could someone trusted by so many become the subject of such disturbing accusations? Investigators caution that appearances alone can never answer that question. A public reputation, whether positive or negative, is not evidence. The only place those questions can ultimately be answered is in a courtroom, where evidence is examined, witnesses are questioned, and both sides have the opportunity to present their case. As the legal process moved forward, prosecutors began preparing for what promised to be one of the most closely watched criminal cases in the region. But beyond the charges themselves, the case also sparked a broader conversation, one that extended far beyond a single defendant. It raised difficult questions about foster care, positions of authority, delayed reporting, and the unique vulnerabilities faced by children who depend entirely on the adults responsible for protecting them. Those questions would soon become part of a much larger discussion surrounding the case. As investigators pieced together the statements, text messages, and interview transcripts, prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to move the case forward. The allegations were no longer confined to an internal investigation. They were about to enter a courtroom. For many in Newport, the news came as a complete shock. Amber Swain wasn't just another resident in town. She was an educator, a foster parent, an adoptive mother, someone whose professional life revolved around protecting children. Now, prosecutors alleged that she had violated the very trust her role demanded. When Swain made her first court appearance, the atmosphere reflected the seriousness of the accusations. The court reviewed a probable cause affidavit, outlining what investigators claimed they had uncovered during the investigation. According to prosecutors, the evidence included statements from the two teenagers, text message exchanges, and Swain's own interview with detectives. At this early stage, the judge was not deciding guilt or innocence. Instead, the question before the court was whether investigators had established probable cause to allow the criminal case to proceed. After reviewing the information, the judge determined that the legal threshold had been met. Swain was ordered to face multiple felony charges, including first-degree incest, second-degree incest, and sexual contact with a minor. Those charges immediately drew widespread public attention. For many people, the word incest brings to mind biological relatives, but legally, the definition can be broader. Because the teenagers had been legally adopted, prosecutors argued that the parent-child relationship established through adoption carried the same legal protections as a biological family relationship. That legal distinction would become one of the defining aspects of the case. Authorities alleged that the crimes involved not strangers, but children who depended on Swain as their parent. The allegations raised difficult questions about trust, authority, and the imbalance of power that can exist inside a family. Investigators emphasize that foster and adoptive parents occupy positions of enormous responsibility. Children entering foster care often come from unstable or traumatic backgrounds. Many have already experienced neglect, abuse, or abandonment before ever entering a new home. Because of that history, experts have long warned that maintaining clear boundaries is essential. Any violation of those boundaries can carry profound emotional consequences. According to investigators, one of the teenagers alleged that the sexual relationship began while he was still 17 years old and continued after he reached adulthood. That timeline became one of the most heavily scrutinized aspects of the investigation. During questioning, detectives say Swain disputed when the relationship began. According to court records, she acknowledged sexual contact, but maintained that it started after the teenager had turned 18. If proven, that version could affect how certain charges are evaluated under Washington law. However, prosecutors argued that the timeline described by the alleged victim, and supported by other evidence they were gathering, painted a different picture. The case, therefore, wasn't expected to hinge on a single admission. Instead, investigators would attempt to establish a timeline using multiple sources of evidence. That could include text messages, digital records, witness statements, and the forensic interviews conducted during the investigation. In criminal cases involving allegations of sexual abuse, investigators often rely on many different pieces of evidence working together rather than one dramatic piece of proof. A victim's statement itself is considered evidence. If other records or testimony support that statement, prosecutors may argue that the overall picture becomes stronger. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, may challenge those same details by questioning memory, timelines, inconsistencies, or credibility. That process ultimately belongs in court. As the investigation continued, another allegation drew attention. According to reports presented in court, prosecutors believed Swain attempted to contact one of the alleged victims after her arrest. Concerned that communication could interfere with the case, prosecutors requested strict no-contact orders. The court agreed. Swain was prohibited from contacting either alleged victim or any minors connected to the case. The judge also imposed conditions on her release. She was ordered not to leave Washington state, while the criminal proceedings remained ongoing. Initially, prosecutors requested a bond of $50,000. The court ultimately set bail at $20,000. While relatively modest compared with some high-profile criminal cases, the bond reflected that the charges carried potentially severe penalties if a conviction were ever obtained. Under Washington law, the combined charges could expose Swain to years in prison, substantial financial penalties, or both. At the same time, her professional life changed almost overnight. The Newport School District placed her on administrative leave while the investigation continued. School officials released a brief public statement acknowledging the criminal case. Without discussing specific allegations, district leaders stated they were taking the matter seriously and were cooperating fully with law enforcement. For parents throughout the community, the announcement was deeply unsettling. Teachers occupy positions built almost entirely on trust. Families send children to school believing educators will provide not only instruction, but also safety. Whenever criminal allegations involve someone in that position, public confidence can be shaken, regardless of how the case ultimately ends. Yet investigators emphasized that the criminal process was only beginning. The filing of charges did not establish guilt. It marked the start of a legal battle, where prosecutors would attempt to prove their allegations beyond a reasonable doubt, while the defense would have the opportunity to challenge every piece of evidence presented. Still, one aspect of the case continued to resonate with investigators and members of the public alike. Amber Swain had built a reputation around helping children. She had publicly spoken about opening her home to those in need. She had advocated for foster care and adoption. That history made the allegations especially difficult for many people to process. Cases involving respected professionals often produce the same question. How could someone trusted by so many become the subject of such disturbing accusations? Investigators caution that appearances alone can never answer that question. A public reputation, whether positive or negative.
Sometimes we talk about the cases, we talk about how there's a pattern here that we see in a lot of cases, such as where there's a teacher abusing their power to have sexual interactions with someone. But I can tell you, in over 25 years, I've handled hundreds and hundreds of sexual misconduct cases. Hardly ever do we have cases involving incest. Do we have, this is someone who, we certainly people unfortunately have allegations of sexual misconduct with children and people they've adopted. So it's not that it never happens.
Is not evidence. The only place those questions can ultimately be answered is in a courtroom where evidence is examined, witnesses are questioned, and both sides have the opportunity to present their case. As the legal process moved forward, prosecutors began preparing for what promised to be one of the most closely watched criminal cases in the region. But beyond the charges themselves, the case also sparked a broader conversation, one that extended far beyond a single defendant. It raised difficult questions about foster care, positions of authority, delayed reporting, and the unique vulnerabilities faced by children who depend entirely on the adults responsible for protecting them. Those questions would soon become part of a much larger discussion surrounding the case. As Amber Swain's case moved through the criminal justice system, the investigation became about more than just the allegations themselves. It also reignited an uncomfortable conversation that has surfaced time and again in cases involving teachers, coaches, youth leaders, and foster parents. How does someone trusted to protect vulnerable children become the person accused of harming them? There is no simple answer. Every case is different. Every allegation must be evaluated on its own evidence. But investigators and prosecutors often point to one recurring factor: access. Many professions that exist to help children also place adults in positions of extraordinary trust. Teachers spend hours each day with students. Foster parents become caregivers inside the home. Counselors, mentors, coaches, and youth advocates often build close relationships with young people who depend on them for guidance and support. The overwhelming majority of those adults never abuse that trust. In fact, countless educators and foster parents dedicate their lives to helping children without ever crossing professional or personal boundaries. But when someone allegedly does misuse that position, the emotional impact can be devastating. According to child welfare experts, children in foster care are often among the most vulnerable members of society. Many have already experienced instability before entering foster care. Some have endured neglect. Others have survived abuse or family violence. For many, being placed with a foster or adoptive family represents the hope of finally finding safety and permanence. Because of that, any allegation involving a caregiver carries unique emotional weight. The relationship is built on trust. A child depends on that adult not only for food and shelter, but also for emotional security. If that trust is broken, the effects can extend far beyond the alleged criminal conduct itself. Investigators also acknowledge another difficult reality. Children in foster care sometimes hesitate to report abuse. Some fear they won't be believed. Others worry they may lose the only stable home they've ever known. Still others fear retaliation or disrupting the lives of siblings living in the same household. Those fears can delay reporting for months or even years. That is one reason investigators often encourage careful forensic interviews conducted by trained professionals, rather than relying on repeated questioning. As this case moves forward, prosecutors will carry the burden of proving every criminal charge beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest legal standard in the American justice system. It exists because criminal convictions can permanently change a person's life. To secure a conviction, prosecutors must persuade a jury that the evidence leaves no reasonable doubt about the defendant's guilt. The defense, meanwhile, has no obligation to prove innocence. Instead, defense attorneys may challenge witness testimony, question timelines, dispute interpretations of evidence, or argue that prosecutors have failed to meet their burden. Those competing arguments are exactly why criminal cases are decided in court rather than in the court of public opinion. One of the central issues in this case may involve timing. Investigators allege that one of the relationships began while the teenager was still 17. Swain, according to court documents, reportedly gave investigators a different timeline.
Right, and that's completely irrelevant because if someone's underage, they're deemed to be incapable of consent, and that's extremely important, that they're incapable of consent. So, and we've seen this in other cases. I've seen this in cases I prosecute where someone says, and a lot of those cases have been involving older men and younger women, where they say, oh, but she was only 16, but she came on to me. She was at a club. She was hitting on me. And it just doesn't matter. It's a strict liability crime, which means that if someone's underage, they're deemed incapable of consent. And there are important reasons for the law being framed like that, is that we don't want the trial to be about who initiated it when someone is underage. They're not deemed capable of consent. And maybe these issues can be a factor in sentencing later, but certainly they're not going to get someone off from being convicted just because the other person initiated it.
If the evidence surrounding those dates is disputed, jurors may eventually be asked to determine which version they believe based on the evidence presented during trial. Another issue, likely to receive attention, is the legal significance of adoption. Although many people associate incest laws only with biological relatives, several states extend those protections to legally recognized parent-child relationships created through adoption. The reasoning is rooted in the same principle. Society places special legal protections around relationships built on parental authority. Whether biological or adoptive, that relationship carries responsibilities that the law treats with exceptional seriousness. Public reaction to the allegations has also highlighted changing attitudes toward cases involving female defendants and male victims. For decades, many experts argued that abuse involving teenage boys was frequently minimized or misunderstood. Today, awareness has grown considerably. Mental health professionals increasingly emphasize that abuse is defined by the abuse of power and the inability to give meaningful consent, not by the gender of those involved. As a result, cases like this are often viewed through a broader understanding of coercion, authority, and vulnerability. At the same time, legal experts caution against reaching conclusions before all of the evidence is presented. An arrest is not a conviction. Charges are accusations. Only a trial, or another lawful resolution of the case, can determine criminal responsibility. For the Newport community, however, the allegations alone have already left a lasting impact. Families who once knew Amber Swain as a teacher, foster parent, and advocate are now watching a criminal prosecution unfold. For the alleged victims, the legal process may involve months or even years before a final outcome is reached. And for everyone connected to the case, the investigation serves as another reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Some of the most difficult criminal cases are not the ones involving strangers. They are the ones involving people who seemed worthy of complete trust, people admired by their communities, people whose public image made suspicion almost unthinkable. Whether the allegations against Amber Swain are ultimately proven in court remains for the justice system to decide. What is already clear is that the case has sparked difficult conversations about trust, accountability, and the responsibility that comes with caring for society's most vulnerable children. As this case continues through the courts, investigators, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and ultimately a judge or jury will determine what the evidence proves. Until then, the allegations remain just that, allegations. The presumption of innocence remains a cornerstone of the justice system, even in cases that generate intense public attention. No matter how shocking the accusations may be, the legal process exists to separate allegation from proof. And in cases like this, that process matters. Because when accusations involve children, families, and positions of extraordinary trust, the search for truth becomes just as important as the verdict itself. This story is still developing, and future court proceedings may reveal additional evidence or lead to new legal developments. We'll continue following the case as more information becomes available. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing for more in-depth true crime stories, where we separate fact from speculation and follow the evidence wherever it leads. Hollow Signal. Thank you for watching.